गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। प्रणाम, जय हिंद एंड वणक्कम। आज हम बात करने वाले हैं एन एनालिसिस ऑफ पीएलए वीकनेसेस एंड दिस एनालिसिस विल बी इन इंग्लिश। व्हाई इंग्लिश? I'm going to do this analysis in English because it's rather long, and I will do this analysis in Hindi, either in Jaipur dialogues or I will make a recording after this and release it, because this is going to be a long analysis. Uh, so doing it bilingually will be a bit of a problem. Right, before I start my analysis or start talking of the PLA, I'd like to welcome a lot of new members who subscribe to Gana Shot. I've been getting a lot of suggestions, make videos small, this, that, and all that. भाई अपना तो अपना style है, and that analytical style is going to be long. Any video, any analysis which is less than say 40-45 minutes is no analysis. Right. Okay. First and foremost, literature on the People's Liberation Army of China is very little. There's no open literature available where you can put your hands and read and analyze them. Second, they have not fought from 1979, so we don't know how they fight. We don't know their performance in battle, and where they have fought, they have not fought well. Right. The PLA is one of the most important elements of the CCP. If you go into the history of the PLA, many times people have used the PLA to get political control, and the CCP has throttled the PLA and has had to purge the PLA to be in political control. In fact, at a point of time, Deng Xiaoping, when he had no other appointment, used the PLA to force his decisions or put across his points of view and force the government of the day, which he had nominated, to follow. And as a result, the PLA is a completely political organization which fights. Most importantly, the PLA is not the army of the state, it is the army of the party. That has tremendous ramifications the way this whole system is going to function. And most of the weaknesses which I put across today are largely strategic in nature. These have to be transposed on ground and applied in a tactical framework intelligently by our own commanders. If you don't do that and think that this is the manna from heaven, it is not. Because these things might vary in a particular operational condition and terrain and etc. etc. But more importantly, this analysis cuts across operational scenarios. It is applicable to a scenario in the Pacific or in Himalayas, though it will veer towards the Indian operational scene. Okay, let's dive into the whole story. Very recently, 4 days back, they came out with this great new map, the new standard map, in which they have shown large swathes of India, the entire swathe of South China Sea as sovereign to them. And this has put the PLA at loggerheads with India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan, Philippines, Brunei, Vietnam, Japan, and Russia. Why they have done it, we don't know. But with the way the tensions are high, we still have our forces in almost a face-to-face situation at Demchok and Depsang. We have disengaged but not de-escalated, right? In the South China Sea, there's always some kind of firing going on to teach China a lesson, to teach Taiwan a lesson. There's some kitpit going on with Philippines. There's FONOPs being going on, and that whole place is a tinderbox, right? It is in this scenario that this map is important because it has raised the tensions, and hence a confrontation or a conflict involving PLA is on the cards. In this time of heightened tensions, how we handle PLA will be important. What I spoke yesterday with General Rajiv Narayanan is the geopolitical aspects of one China, etc., etc., etc. Today we are dealing with the PLA in a battlefield. Some time back, this article came, not long back, uh, 23, sorry, March 23. Xi Jinping says he's preparing for war. The world should take him seriously. Matt Pottinger and his friend have written this article, very uh, important article, which says that Xi Jinping has done whatever he has said he will do. And at every stage in the past 10 years, he has said, prepare for war. If he's preparing China for war, and if the geopolitical tensions are what it is at this point of time and what they are, we need to take him seriously. Right. The next thing is that I have all been saying so far uh, for the past 6 months that this is the brick wall of China. This brick wall is shaky. The bottom two bricks are the demographic and climate change, which are hitting them hard. The demography is declining, and even now there's a super cyclone or a super, hurricane hitting southwest China, and this year has been bad, and climate change is going to stay. Private sector, consumption, real estate, food insecurity, jobs, infrastructure, exports, healthcare. I've done videos on it. This is the talk of the town. And this analysis indicates China is in dumps, deflation, nothing going right. And how is Xi Jinping redeeming it? He is redeeming it through diplomacy, technology, and military. He is hoping that his diplomacy will create avenues for trade and his technology will take him to the next level. And to do that, he needs his military to leverage everything. Xi Jinping is betting on a top three, and hence we need to see how to defeat PLA. You can't defeat PLA unless you know his weaknesses. Right. They said long back, on the offside, first there is God and then Saurav Ganguly. This is what Rahul Dravid said. And everyone says that Saurav Ganguly is the god of offside. And this phrase was coined first by Geoffrey Boycott. Unbeatable. But if you look into Saurav Ganguly's career, many times he's got out playing an offside shot. His biggest strength was also his biggest weakness. This is the main message, and I'll elaborate on it. These days, when you read about PLA, you see articles like this: China military, how Beijing is pushing forward its plan for a powerful modern armed forces. China is not, uh, holding back expenditure on uh, the PLA, right? Shiny new weapons, great breakthroughs in military technology. Look at this laser, a huge breakthrough on laser weapons technology. So they're going to get deployed fast. It's testing the planet's most powerful coil gun, railgun. All this puts the scare. One gets the feeling that it's the most modern and technologically sound army. It's launched bigger, faster version of a guided missile frigate, and that's being built and all that. So as a result, one gets the feeling that this army is from a different planet, right? But the way I look at it, the formidable PLA it is formidable. There's no doubt about it. Make no mistake, is also its biggest weakness. God of the offside theory. And if we think that PLA does not have weaknesses, then we are also living on another planet. We have to understand whatever I talk today is that PLA is not a weak force, but PLA is a force which has its weaknesses. And it is up to us to discover those and deflate the PLA if we have to do it. That's the point. If we have to do it. And smaller nations have to see how they use this set of weaknesses to deflect the PLA, because definitely smaller nations can't handle PLA. It's only the bigger nations like USA and India which can handle PLA. Okay, before we say PLA is the most modern force with the best weapons, hypersonic, space, this, that, precision weapons, all that, remember, history says that the battle of unequals, the weaker force wins. The weaker force invariably becomes a stronger force. Recently, we had this, put it in Hindi, Chappaldari Taliban defeated USA. And USA had to exit Afghanistan after 20 years of fighting unceremoniously. Look at Vietnam. If you study the history of Vietnam, Vietnam has defeated France, then defeated USA and China. And these are all superpowers of their time with nothing. They had almost nothing. They carried ammunition on modified cycles. In the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, if you read it, because I read it when I was in the Indian Military Academy. Something different. At that time, France was one of the most modern armies. Then who can forget the Vietnam War and Americans? The most technologically advanced army lost. And then, of course, 79, the Chinese. They copped it badly. And now, look at Russia and Ukraine. What's Ukraine taught us? A well supplied, a well motivated defender can effectively disrupt or even defeat a clearly superior adversary. Whoever thought that Ukraine will still be giving Russia a hard time 16 months down the line? It doesn't matter who wins militarily. One thing we are sure, Russia has not had a walkover. In fact, Russia is getting hit in its own side today. You leave the geopolitics aside. So every army, good, bad, or ugly, has its Achilles heels. And that is important. As a defender or as an offender, every army has the capability of increasing the cost and length and duration of the military conflict to the detriment of the attacker. In the way things are going, in all cases, it will be PLA which will be the attacker. It is the PLA which is seeking war. So, how you use this, and this lesson could be applicable to Philippines, it could be applicable to Taiwan, it could be applicable to Brunei. And PLA is weak in many places, and as we go along, I'll explain it to you. The first major strength of PLA and the first major weakness of PLA is that PLA is a political entity. Go back to the times of Mao. Our principle is that the party commands the gun, and the gun must never be allowed to command the party. Xi Jinping has been reiterating this often of late. He wants absolute loyalty of the PLA to the party. Right? And herein lies the issue. And this is actually one of the major weaknesses of PLA, and how it is manifesting, we will just see. Very, 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 differently, in communist armies, it is the party which gives the military guiding theory. And the CCP rather, the CCP has given a guiding theory to its military. I'll talk about it a little later. But their theory and their guidance, which they give to the PLA, is the party's systemic thinking about warfare and national defense issues. They have incorporated the thoughts of Karl Marx, Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and now Xi. The thinking is political; it is not professional. It is, if you analyze the PLA from the start to now, the political direction is more important to the PLA. And the leaders have expected the PLA to fight the way they think PLA should fight. And the PLA has been pushed into doing that, always. The PLA is a party organ and not a national instrument, is something which I mentioned earlier also. Right. Now, have a look at it a little closer. Every strongman of PRC, Mao, Deng, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao, has given his concept of how PLA should fight, and he's developed it accordingly. Once Xi Jinping took over, somewhere in 2015, he started changing the goalposts for the PLA. And when he took over, the flavor of the day was local warfare under informatized conditions. He's changed it to local warfare under intelligentized conditions. Now, when you talk of intelligentized conditions, you're talking of AI. He wants AI to come into the battlefield in a big manner. Now, AI is still aspirational. How AI will fit into the battlefield is still up in the air. But largely, what he wants is a network force which is rather heavy on surveillance and reconnaissance, coupled with precision guided ammunitions. That's his concept. This network has to be AI based, and is going heavily nuclear, and is going heavily maritime. There's a distinct shift from being a conventional land based force or a continental based armed force to a maritime force. But the interesting thing in all their talks, all their logic, is that there's a distinct absence of writing or thinking of maneuver in their thought processes. And this could be bad. And they've exhibited this lack of maneuver in eastern Ladakh, their inability to maneuver. They couldn't maneuver in high altitude, in finger four, and outflank the Indians who got on top of the finger four north of Pangong Tso. They also couldn't maneuver or couldn't think of maneuvering when they had the initiative to occupy the Kailash Range. And when we occupied the Kailash Range, they couldn't maneuver further. And they had to backtrack. And this lack of maneuver is evident in 79, their operations against Vietnam also. So this is an issue which is, I think, little iffy in the PLA construct and their thought of warfare. You can't win wars through firepower and networking and information alone. You can deter with this. You can't win wars. Unless, of course, the PLA is being used as a deterrent force or a coercive force with their thought process of winning wars without fighting. If that be so, China might be looking at a case where they might be losing wars without fighting. They have a tremendous emphasis on cutting edge technologies, which include advanced unmanned drone systems, big data analysis to improve the speed and accuracy of decision making on the battlefield, and hypersonic missiles that may be able to evade enemy defenses. All this is high tech. We'll talk of high technology a little later. But remember, big data analysis to improve the speed and accuracy of decision making is important to register. Who makes the decision? The PLA has exhibited over years to look over the back to get a decision. So, who's getting this information? We don't know. Is this information being fed to the back, to the detriment of the soldier on ground? Because the decisions have to be taken in the battlefield, a lot of them. And their dual commissar system and command system, their dual command system, don't give that flexibility. Right. The next thing, let's look at some of the issues which their leaders have brought up about the PLA. The question marks of the PLA. Right? If you look at it, Hu Jintao formulated the theory of two incompatibles. What are the two incompatibles? PLA's level of modernization does not meet the requirements for winning local wars under informatized conditions. Its military capability does not meet the requirements of carrying out its historic missions. What are the historic missions? We don't know. So there's a military, and this is something which he said in 2006. Have they been rectified? In 2013, when Xi Jinping took over, he revived the Deng era slogan of two inabilities. There's two incompatibles. Now 7 years later, he's talking of two inabilities. What are the inabilities? As per him, PLA does not have the ability to fight a modern war. and the ability of its cadres, that is officers, at all levels to command modern men are not sufficient, or rather, modern war is not sufficient. So you go back to that thing, you use a decision making system, and then you say your officers are not capable of using it, then where's the leadership? Then they talk of the two big gaps. The two big gaps between the PLA's military modernization level and the requirements of national security compared to the level of the world's advanced militaries. In this, they are comparing themselves with USA. There is a concern in the nation as a whole, and this comes through in their white papers if you read them, over PLA fighting capabilities in general compared to other advanced militaries, highlighting the relative gap. Their complete white papers, if you analyze the PLA white papers, you realize that they are always aspirational. You remain aspirational and on a catch up basis only when you perceive a gap against the top. And what is most surprising is that they always trying to aspire to do catch up with US Army and best it. Army, armed forces, best it. But how are they going to deal with lesser forces whom they consider inferior is not known. Right? And then there's a thing called the three weathers, whether the PLA can maintain the party's absolute leadership, loyalty. Whether it is Lin Bao or the Gang of Four or the first person, I don't remember, Mao's, military compatriot who was later sidelined. There's always been a threat from the PLA to the party leadership. The next whether is whether it can fight victoriously when needed, and whether commanders at all levels are competent to lead troops and command in war. You can find this on War on the Rocks. And then Xi Jinping has put out five incapables. What are his five incapables? He talks of officers who cannot judge situations, understand higher authorities' intent, make operational decisions, deploy troops, and or deal with unexpected situations. Here you have the Xi Jinping, the head of the state, talking of this about his officers, the senior officers. So he perceives himself a leadership deficit. Then there is corruption, and we'll talk of corruption. All white papers talk of corruption. Then there's this fantastic thing called the peace disease. They realize that that peace is a disease which they have not been able to overcome. They have not fought. The peace disease has come, and they have not gone to war to offset this disease. Then there's this business of tyranny of distance. They see PLA going far away and fighting, and they don't know how to do that. There's a big gap. And then the different kinds of war they have to undertake when they become a global force. The war you have to do in the Pacific is different from the war you have to do in the Indian Ocean and the difference in Atlantic or on the Himalayas or elsewhere. Is the PLA geared psychologically, operationally, to fight these battles where they are? I don't think so. And I'll highlight it a little. Maybe down the line, I did a presentation in one of the conferences held in the Chennai Center for China Studies, where I outlined the PLA strategy in the Indo-Pacific, right? And I found there are three different strategies and three different skill sets involved. Do they have them? I'll talk of it specifically down the line, maybe later this month. Then what happened in the 20th Party Congress? Xi Jinping stressed the need for military capabilities to shape our security posture, deter and manage crises and conflicts, and win local wars. He's speaking of local wars. He keeps repeating local wars. So when he keeps repeating local wars, the first thing I said, he is only looking at local wars. He is not prepared for long wars. He wants to win in a hurry. And that's what he's tried against us. He tried it initially when he probed at Demchok and Rakinala. Then he tried in eastern Ladakh. He tried in the east Sikkim, North Sikkim, at Nakula. In 2020, where that he got a knock, and then at Yangtze. And this is interesting. The local wars concept was absent in the 19th Party Congress, but in the 20th Party Congress, it came back. Right? So, what is PLA trying to do? This concept serves to limit the scale of war that PLA should prepare for and constrain defense budget growth. They want a short war with one enemy. It's axiomatic, or I wouldn't say axiomatic. It is for us to ponder. It's a big dichotomy. They want to fight a local war with one adversary, and they put out a map which has made 8 adversaries against them. And now they are faced with a multi-adversary situation with a chain warfare principle. I'll talk about it later. Now, again, this issue, Xi Jinping is worried about political reliability, mobilization, fighting and winning wars, and leadership and command. This is a recurring feature from Xi Jinping or their military thinking. Why would it be so? If there was no. Has anyone in India worried about leadership, the Indian military leadership? Have you ever thought that your commanders were incapable? Has anyone in the US Army thought that his general was incapable? I've interacted with him, I've never thought so. Right? So there is an issue. The jelly bean stuff one has to, look at. He keeps summoning the leadership regularly to Beijing from various districts, and it keeps coming. This is a South China Morning Post extract. And he says loyalty to the party is at the heart of armed forces goal. And this comes out in PLA daily regularly, tight political discipline to avoid setbacks and losses, and that the party must command the gun. The party must command the gun, but the party is also scared of the gun. Right. This came out very recently and very interesting. It gives you the instability which is there. And today I read someone gave me a tweet about a Chinese website where they have said that Xi Jinping is facing. I had to translate the Chinese into English, where Xi Jinping is worried about his military. And this came about 2 months back or a month back. We'll have a closer look at it. I'll read through it. Chinese military issues unprecedented rules for top commanders' social lives in move not tried even in Mao Zedong's time. New set of rules controlling social activities of serving and retired senior officers of PLA. He's given out a code of conduct for dealing with Communist Party officials, government bodies, state-owned enterprises and organizations, media, academic and research bodies, ethnic minorities and religious groups, foreign institutions, members as well as people they meet online. Even when in service, I never had all this problem. Right? Now, what do you do when you're in a CI situation? What do you do when you're in an insurgency situation? You don't meet these people. You have to deal with them. But he banned them from doing it. So the political system will come in to deal with military situations, come what may. And what's more interesting is all these restrictions are applicable to senior retired officers and senior retired officers for life. Right? Now, this report goes on to say that this is an unprecedented move to have a set of codes on social life for senior cadres. One of the political thing. This has not been done in Mao's era. Now, the last thing is important. The new rules which target leading cadres of the military would also be applied to retired generals who are known to wield considerable influence over the younger leaders. So you're looking at a clique which he is worried will develop or is operating against the system. Right? And then there's an echo chamber effect. And that echo chamber effect is a problem for all dictators and authoritarian guys because you'll never get the truth. Since you're not open, you put everything on the thing, no one will tell you the truth. Because if he tells the truth, he is going to be had. And if he tells the truth and it is not palatable to the senior, his career will go. Now, someone will say, look, this is feasible in any army, any society, any political setup. I agree. Possible. Okay. See the last two lines. Dispensing bad news to one superior is not deemed career enhancing or life prolonging. I know many cases of senior officers telling, sorry, this is what I'll do and this is what I can't do. I've done it myself. I do remember in a very tricky situation, I put my point of view across. And I was told by a senior police, I was not told. A very senior police officer asked my staff, hey, look, your brigadier doesn't want to go up. He's going to be sealed the way he's spoken today. Well, nothing happened. I'm here, retired Lieutenant General, retired as a DGRT. In fact, 3 months after what they spoke, I was cleared for my next rank also. That happens in a democracy. That's the strength of a democracy. Democracy has the capability and the bandwidth to accept a different point of view and dissent to some extent. But in the army at senior ranks, it's more different point of view, hard truth. Face the truth. I don't think that is feasible in China. If that is not feasible in China, there are problems. And what those problems are, I'll just highlight. Then there's the issue of experience. The Chinese military has not fought a real battle since its disastrous border war with Vietnam. We all know that. So while it has invested massively in military modernization, the PLA's competence and capabilities in combat remain untested. Because the weapons they are using have not been tested. The ideas they have not been tested. The people have not been tested. To offset this experience, they have increased their presence in UN missions, where they have performed very poorly, which I'll come to a little later. And they are doing a lot of exercises with Russians. They're taking a lot of teaching from Russians. Then whatever they have learned from the Russians has actually gone out of the window in the Ukraine war. And the whole story of the Ukraine war and the Russian lessons which they have learned is counterintuitive to this local war philosophy. How will they manage it? We don't know. Are they prepared for a long war? They might not be. Are they seeking short, you know, finishes to all war? Yes, they are. Is it feasible? I don't know. So in every conflict, there's something called exit philosophy. If you don't have an exit philosophy, don't have an exit option, you don't go into the option. Once our Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, he was asked, why don't we prosecute war against Pakistan? So he told someone in Hindi, हम लड़ाई तो ले लेंगे पर इसका नतीजा क्या होगा, इसके बाहर हम कैसे निकलेंगे, वो मेरे को नजर नहीं आ रहा. And this was in context with Pakistan. So if you go into a war and you don't have an exit strategy, you're sunk. And that's what's happening to Russia in Ukraine. That's what happened to USA in Afghanistan. And that's what happened to USA in Iraq, where they had to declare a victory and get out. And that's what happened to Pakistan in Kargil. They got in without an exit strategy, hoping that they'll finish the war X, Y, Z. So this business of local war is counterintuitive and contraindicative to what could happen. In which case, the top level direction and prosecution of war in the PLA is suspect. And that also explains why PLA came to whatever you call it in Eastern Ladakh. They came to the table in Eastern Ladakh. Till we occupied Kailash Range and outmaneuvered them, they were not budging. The tone of the PLA was something different. The day we did that, and a few days after that, when they knew that they could not do and that it's going to be a prolonged war or conflict or face off, whatever you call it, they started taking terms because they were not prepared for it. I don't think they were politically prepared. I don't think they were militarily prepared. Classic case of attempting a local conflict which backfired on them. Yeah, you can talk of the fact that they're retaining some part of Demchok and some part of Depsang. उसका भी number आएगा. Okay, I read an article which said this: China's military has undergone major upgrades. There are 3 significant reasons to doubt its prowess. Dysfunctionality of civil-military relations in a dictatorship. That's what I said. Who's the boss? Who commands the gun? Here is a political system which is giving military directives. And the military commanders dare not speak the truth. Plausibility of existing insider critics. That is always ever present in an opaque system like the Communist Party of China. And I did a video on Xi Jinping's purges a few days back, last month. How he's sorting out the banking system. He sorted out his finance minister. He sorted out top rocket artillery generals. In fact, I spoke at length about this with General Raj Shukla. आप देखिए उसको. Rocketing the rocket force generals. वो है video. And there's an unreliable alchemy inherent in assessing combat effectiveness. Which means how do you assess the combat effectiveness of this force, which has not demonstrated anything? And of course, the military command culture is highly centralized and top down. This is again indicative or counterintuitive to your requirement of uh, reconnaissance, artificial intelligence, decision making, everything. Now, all that actually implies that you have to delegate responsibility and delegate decision making to the lowest level. And then you get on to a directive style of command. That's how maneuver warfare is fought, and that's the use of information. Because you can always pull back command and control if you have the information. But in this case, it doesn't seem so. And then, of course, this is the crux of the weakness of the PLA, the four news. I call it the four news. New soldiers, new equipment, new organization, and new roles. Their conscript system, where 2 years is the conscript time, implies that the turnover of soldiers is very huge. And they're always having new soldiers in their system. They're trying to offset it by having a hardcore NCO cadre, but one doesn't know where it is going. So every time, everything is new equipment. Every day, like I showed you, laser gun, coil gun, this gun, that frigate, that jet, that aircraft, that frigate. All shiny new equipment. They're all coming in. It's all new. Let me tell you from my personal example. From the time you say, I want a gun system, just guns, we're talking about, into my armed forces, just to put a regiment operationally ready takes you 2 years. You hurry it 1 year because you don't form a regiment from new people completely. You take an old regiment, you give him new equipment because you have a structure, and that old equipment is given to someone else. So a regiment has to actually hand over old equipment to someone, take over the new equipment, carry out conversion into the new equipment, carry out organizational changes for the new equipment, train on it, fire on it, carry out exercises, and then go and deploy. And you have a capability to train a certain amount, X amount of regiments at one given time. And this cycle takes a year to two. The M777s which we've got, it has taken us 3 years to induct them into the army. It's not easy. And here they're getting equipment every day. And then there are new organizations. They've got 3 aircraft carriers. Fine. That means that they've got 3 fleets. It's in 3 new organizations where people don't even know how to communicate. I'll bet my bottom dollar on it. Then they've switched to this theater command story. 5 theater commands. It's nice to say theater commands. How do you mesh them? How do you work on them? And new roles. I'll talk of those new roles. The role of China till the turn of the century was homeland protection, broadly. Defense, sovereignty of the nation. But now you want to go all over the globe. New equipment, new roles, new organization, new equipment, everything is new. Just think. Just fundamentally think. When you get married, just 2 people, husband and wife, new. How long does it take for you to sort out things? Then this law of inertia. Everything is stable till an external force is not applied. And when an external force is applied, that system moves in the direction of that external force till it achieves its state of inertia. And here you have 4 factors which are constantly changing the state of inertia of PLA. And then everyone talks to me and says, sir, You're getting Russian equipment, you're getting Chinese, you're getting French equipment, you're getting Israeli equipment. How can you put them together and fight? How does can India do it? I'll ask the same question for China. They have old equipment, new equipment, and something new coming. How are they meshing all this? It is not easy. And I think, and I'll bet my bottom dollar on these four news. This is the weakest part of the PLA. There are too many inductions of untested technologies. We don't know whether these technologies will function in war. In many cases, see, it's nice to hear that Russia has fired 20 missiles. How many have failed? And what is the effect? What is the end result of all this technology? That goddamn line of contact has not moved more than 5-6 kilometers either side for the past 1 year. And there's a looming resource constraint. And let me explain this in the context of the Chinese economy. Okay, I'll put it in the Indian context and then you'll understand it in the Chinese context. It's the same thing. I have a gun, 105 IFG, made in India from 1984. So I have a regiment which has got 105 IFG. And that gun cost me, say, 3 lakhs or 4 lakhs, or say 10 lakhs. Chalo, 10 lakhs per gun. 18 guns, 180 lakhs, 1.8 crores. And ammunition to go with it, manpower to go with it, XYZ. I'm happy. I've been using it. That cost is sunk cost. Now, what do? I want the most modern gun. Let's say Bofors. So Bofors, when it happened, it was the most modern gun. And Bofors, each gun cost me 2 crores. So what I have done? From 10 lakhs, I've jumped to 2 crores and spent 20 times on each gun. So my cost has increased 20 times. The old ammunition I have to discard and put new ammunition, so the cost of the new ammunition also kicks in. The old 105 IFG round was at 10,000. The new Bofors ammunition is 1 lakh per round. So that's also gone 10 times up. So when you put out an old equipment and get in a new equipment, there's a cost factor of 10, multiplicative 10 to 20. And then the cost of spares, which will kill you throughout your life. Because the IFG didn't need any spares. This fellow will bloody guzzle spares up. The cost will go. And then if I have to put another new equipment down the line, how much can I afford? At some point, it will start costing. So this business of modernization needs very deep pockets. And now, as China's economy starts going down, the resource constraint will start kicking in. Let's not have doubts about it. And if you think I'm talking off my hat, this is yesterday's news in South China Morning Post. Have a look at what this fellow says. Who's he? He's the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. Chinese general calls for quality weapons so PLA can win any battle in a complex global situation. What does he say in this? He says we must do a good job in improving the quality of our weaponry. So he is talking of improving quality of weaponry, which means the weaponry is not up to the mark in the first place. I mean, look at that's the way Chinese behave. And for this to come out in South China Morning Post means the situation is pretty bad. Okay? So we can win any battle, strengthen our combat ability, and protect the lives of our soldiers. He's not talking of winning wars. He wants to protect his life. Okay. And this came when two-day meeting from Monday came after a month after a reshuffle of PLA's rocket force, which saw at least, it could be more, it is more, it's about 6 steps, or three of its senior officers placed under investigation for corruption. In one fell swoop, the most important rocket force which you have, which is your most strategic rocket force, you finished off its leadership. And now you have the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission saying the quality is not good. And he himself has said, due to lack of transparency, problem of corruption in the rocket force is becoming alarming with a lot of illegal bidding operations being discovered. And the last one says the unprecedented decision to appoint commanders with little missile operation experience to head the strategic force. It's a classic case of a square peg in a round hole. I am not saying this. The Chinese are saying this. Okay, now let's talk of the roles. His first problem is domestic security, which is internal and external. He has to protect his motherland. Till recently, that's what he did. Suddenly, around between 2005-6, he started building these islands in the South China Sea and he started claiming the Senkakus and Diaoyus, which is he calls Diaoyus, and he started showing eyes to Taiwan. So from there, he has now gone to a regional dynamic, or rather a completely closed dynamic from guarding the mainland. He's gone offensive. He needs a different set of capabilities. But that doesn't mean his own set of capabilities to defend the motherland are poor. Now, let me highlight this a little further. Way back in 71, when the 7th Fleet came off the Chennai coast, USS Enterprise, yeah, halchal mach gaya tha. People were worried, and they were way down, they didn't even cross the 5-degree line. Oh, USS Enterprise is here. What will happen to us? I was a small boy, school boy. I was about to join the NDA then. Here you have 3 carrier task forces of the USA based out of Guam, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, and this plus Diego Garcia, which can go down there. And they're operating 500 to 600 kilometers away from your coastline. Every time a carrier task force comes within 400 to 500 kilometers of your coastline, your sovereignty is challenged. You have to take care of your land. It's nice to say I have killer missiles here. Who knows will they function or not? The fact is, if there are 3 carrier groups there, you have to take care of your own defenses. So that's the first task of the PLA. Then they have an internal task because internally everything can go wrong. And then they have an external task, which they've started of bullying all the people around, small thing around. And now they also have regional security. They've taken up cudgels against India, all those points of where they've tried to incurse. So they have a theater there. They have a theater in the South Pacific or the Western Pacific where the arrows have shown. And then, of course, the Indian Ocean region. So they've got 3 theaters. And then the global. So there are completely new roles which have happened. Is the PLA capable of handling it? I don't think so. I don't think they're equipped also to do this. Okay. Then there's this great single child conscript army. You know, everyone talks of the single child, single child, single child. I'll view it a little differently and put it across to you, and you take your call on it. You have to understand that the PLA of the old times are tough guys. I've seen them. I've seen them in my formative years because that PLA was a tough PLA. They fought part of the Long March. And in my unit, I had guys who were taken prisoner in the 62 ops. I've interacted with them, and they said those guys were tough. And they were tough. I've done a video on the 1962 ops, the difference between the 1962 ops and Eastern Ladakh. Please have a look at it. I'll release it tomorrow again. And at that time, the kind of infiltration they did in tough terrain, it needed a terrifically strong army to do that. Especially in the Sela sector in Arunachal, they came deep into our enemy territory, or rather Indian territory, and put roadblocks. You needed a lot of guts, you needed a lot of organization, you needed a lot of toughness to do that, physical toughness. I don't. And this same army in Eastern Ladakh could not outmaneuver just the hill. They didn't try. So this army is not so strong as before. I mean, you have to see it against a continuum. Now then, China cannot accept body bags in a declining demography, or they're all single child. They have to protect their mothers. They have to protect their grandparents, breadwinners. So there's no motivation. There's no motivation to join the armed forces. These two factors alone weaken the PLA. Besides what I have said. Earlier, I was talking of strategic. Here, people have to fight. Will that chap die for his country? Will he die for Tibet to protect a life? Tibet some point till some point? Yes, after that. This is the thing. They went to UN. This is a tweet I saw. It was sent to me by someone. And there's a Nepal correspondent's tweet. You can see it. You can see it on the thing. This came about 3-4 months back. Sudanese Rapid Support Forces have barged into a military industrial complex in Khartoum and captured several Chinese 302mm VCM multiple launchers, that is Smerch equivalent, A100, with ammunition. The PLA troops securing the facility ran away. This is a reproduction of that tweet. I didn't imagine it. And I was speaking the other day to a very senior officer who's served alongside UN people alongside Chinese in the UN. He's confirmed this. I'll talk of it a little later also. This one-child army is more inclined to add unmanned aircraft. There's another view which has come out, which I put it across in short form. More inclined to add unmanned aircraft and ballistic missiles. PLA has increased the deployment of battleships and fighter planes, but their operating rates are not exactly high. It won't be, because all new equipment will have teething problems. Huge teething problems. Especially ones which are heavily dependent on electronics and all. Look, the battle is a very dirty place. It's an unhygienic place. And all these fragile electronics, AI, SHI, and all that have to work there. It doesn't work that well. Now, the next thing is it seems they are unable to sufficiently train enough soldiers to properly maintain and repair the high-tech hardware. That's the point I'm trying to make. High-tech hardware, and you have to go to high altitude to see how they fail. You have to see how a diesel engine starts. You virtually have to put a fire under that diesel line and melt the diesel because it's frozen to start a vehicle. And that diesel is already diluted by kerosene by about 60% because kerosene doesn't freeze. Now, what has all this led to? This is what I have added in the end. To offset fighting, hand-to-hand fighting and direct combat, China has got over-reliance on non-contact warfare. Precision guidance, this, what, that, all that half-woo. It doesn't work beyond a point. It works up to a point. Once the firing starts, it doesn't work. I don't know if anyone of you been under fire. The first time I heard of close quarter battle going on, firing bullets flying, my stomach churned. And if anyone says his stomach doesn't churn when he has this, then he's lying. Fear is endemic to human psychology. You get over it. That's a literature story. You you can't rely every time on non-contact warfare. You can't rely on precision. You can't. You have to fight. Now these are things Chinese military short of troops trained in high-tech operation. In this article, this came about 6 months back. They say they don't have commanders for their naval fleets. Period. What's the use of having the biggest navy without commanders? And if you have to promote useless fellows to command ships without passing, uh, you know, then what happens? China recruits women to fly carrier-based warplanes in Navy because they're facing pilot shortage. This is known. They don't have people to train their aircraft. They're getting guys, paying guys and getting mercenary kind of guys from Australia and USA and all that. We know that. So your training is also not good. Interesting. China military relaxes physical rules for non-combat high-tech troops. All these are reports from South China Morning Post. Why is China doing it? We don't do it, even for high-tech appointments. There's no relaxation, which means they're not getting the material. And if your chap is not, look, even if you're a high-tech guy, if you are under battle conditions, you have to handle battle stress. If you're physically not fit, you can't handle battle stress. China's Navy looks to junior high schools to find pilots for its aircraft carriers. ये हालत है और फिर हम बोलते हैं ये सुपर पावर है कैसे I mean there is something we are overestimating this force. Now China is trying to fix unemployment, which is a major problem, by enhanced enrollment into the PLA. Then what? They're not a social sector organization. Look, every army has got social responsibilities. But this is not the way to go. AB, China's military academies enroll record 17,000 high school graduate as youth joblessness soars. This is just 2 days back or 3 days back. So now you're talking. I mean, this is the army is now become for joblessness. They're increasing the intake. So who's interested? The motivation levels, the physical fitness, the ability to handle high-tech weapons, the ability to maintain high-tech weapons is all question mark. It's nice to say high-tech weapons, but maintaining high-tech weapons in battlefield conditions is the most difficult thing, believe you me. This is a very interesting comment I got from somewhere. PLA has not been in actual conflict. They cannot frame the training as if they were in combat scenario. The question is, how can they train as they fight? If they don't know what fighting looks like, what are you training for? You have to train based on how your enemy behaves, or what fighting you experience you have, how the weapon behaves. It's a mix. Training is not so simple. If training was so simple, why would I go to School of Artillery and still talk to people? I'm giving my experience to them and talking to them of tomorrow's warfare. Or for that matter, why should I go to Army War College or National Defense College and talk of tomorrow's story and yesterday's story? And why would retired people talk about all this nonsense? So their training is, if you don't know what you're training for, what are you training? Okay, look at this. This is the same story. They have named a naval guy in charge of the rocket force, which I said earlier also. He's got no experience in rocket forces, and he is now the head of the strategic force. And this purge is across. It's what is coming out. Today's news, somewhere it is there's some chap from Wang Fei or whoever it is. He was probably the previous defense minister. He's been sacked and he's been also put under like in the can or whatever. Jo bhi hota hai udhar. There's another view. Induction of advanced weaponry to a military force that is ill trained, ill managed might not result in a PLA that can achieve the party's strategic objectives. But new hardware enables Beijing to perpetuate its projected images of military strength while concealing continued shortfalls. This is what we are suffering from. He projects something which might not be true. Right? You have vast quantities of new aircraft and seacraft. Certainly impressive. It, it deflects attention at home and abroad. Right. And when you put all this, it's easy to identify and quantify. Oh, itne frigate, itne largest army, this, that, all that nonsense. But does it ensure success in battle? Question mark. Now, quality of personnel, effectiveness of training, morale, and command and control are extremely important, but they're all difficult to measure. Intangibles of war. Now, the last line is important, which someone has written. I've just put it across to you. To be effective, a military not only needs sound doctrine, organization, weaponry, personal training, logistics, and culture, but also needs each of these components to blend together in the right proportion. That's what I'll add. So, where are we going? Now, China has equated national greatness with military prowess. Now, wars require unimaginable courage and endurance on the part of the combatants. They are won by sheer brawn, production capacity, and intellectual creativity. These three, does China have them? Some they have. There's no doubt. It's a formidable force, I said. They are the god of the offside, but I'm seeing how to get them out. Right? Modern wars will be determined more by brains and open mindedness than by tough guy posturing that Russia is discovering today. China will also discover if they get involved. You need leadership, you need good commanders, you need NCOs, JCOs, junior leadership. Essence of the strength of the entire capability is just not technical but cultural also. You have to have a willingness to delegate authority and to accept counsel of a subordinate. And you should not be looking over your shoulder every time. And this is not inherent or not demonstrated in PLA. Now you see, the entire army is a reticent army which has not stepped out of China. You've seen Chinese have been killed in Pakistan. They've not done anything about it. Nothing. The PLA has not spoken a word. Choo. They're dependent on the Pakistanis to help them. They've been hammered in Africa. Afghanistan. So many people talk of Afghanistan. They want mines, this, that, and all that. Have they ventured into Afghanistan? They're not interested. It's nice to say I want to rule the world and have a modern military army or the most modern army and the most strongest army in the world. But you have to demonstrate your capabilities outside China. Their aircraft carriers have not left their shores because they don't have aircraft. Remember, they've gone back 9 kilometers in Pangong Tso. Then they're worried about this. There's something which I recently read called the chain reaction warfare, for which they're not totally out of gear. PLA strategists have long been concerned that conflict in one theater could trigger fighting with other countries. In any war, PLA must prepare for other contingencies and to clamp down on domestic turmoil. That's inherent in China. Beijing does not trust its ability to successfully use large-scale force against Taiwan. They're worried. That has come out in a lot of analysis, even from within China, and has even less confidence that it can manage a war both with Taiwan and any subsequent chain reaction conflicts. So the issue is, can it face a two-front war? In fact, the Chinese talk of a four-front war, and they're worried. And here you have Xi Jinping talking of local wars. So this is a major issue which people don't understand when it comes to PLA. Don't think of PLA as having tremendous. It has got tremendous capabilities. I have no doubt about it. Can it be put to effect in war? I don't know. I'll take one example: the PLAF airfields in Tibet. I've been talking of it a lot. Let me explain. And this is in Eurasia Times. There are 15 air operational bases in two military regions from where PLAF can launch air operations. Right? And these airfields are in tactical battle areas, which are across. But if you look at the immediate battlefield, there are only 5 airfields from where PLA PLAF can take off. That is Kotan, Huping, Konkasong, Donchun, and Pangta. Except for Kotan, the other airfields are at an average altitude of 4,000 meters. And Kotan itself is at 1,400 meters, which is the same elevation as Srinagar. The last one is very important. The airlift capability of PLAF is extremely limited due to the exponential reduction in carrying capacity at high altitudes. For instance, an IL-76 of the IAF can carry 40 tons from Chandigarh to Leh. But on the return trip to Leh Chandigarh, it will carry barely half the load or even lesser. Let me give you a worst case scenario. In summers, in daytime, even half the load it doesn't carry. It carries zero load. I've seen IL-76s take off from Leh with no load and shuddering to take off. That means day operations are virtually out for fighter aircraft based in thing. In operational times, your PLAF, which is operating with 4,000 meters high altitude runways, is non-functional. It can only operate at night. And high altitude operations at night have their own tricks. It's very difficult. So when we talk, we have to talk in terms of terrain, this, that, everything. This is it. Look at this. This is a thing from The Guardian. It came about 6 years back, but it happened. UN peacekeepers refused to help as aid workers were raped in South Sudan. Who are these UN workers? Chinese. During fighting in Juba in 2016, it's not far back, 7 saal pehle, fighting qualities don't get happen overnight. Chinese peacekeepers reportedly abandoned their post entirely, and it actually has happened because one of my friends has seen this, who was in UN then. Rather than courageously protecting vulnerable civilians seeking refuge, the PLF peacekeepers fled, leaving arms and ammunition behind. They've done it in 2016, they've done it in